It's funny the things you remember when your world breaks apart. For me, it wasn't the words themselves, not at first. It was the smell: roast turkey, sweet potato pie, the sharp green scent of the pine wreath on the door. It was the warm, golden light from the dining room chandelier sparkling on my mother's best china. It was the sound of my own heartbeat, loud in my ears as I sat perfectly still in my chair. Dear listeners, before we begin this story, I want to ask you a favor. If my story resonates with your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which city or state you are listening from. It warms my spirit to know how far my voice travels. Happy listening. Christmas dinner. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be soft. That year had been a long, slow ache. I'd lost my job in the spring. A round of layoffs, they said, nothing personal, but it felt personal. It felt like a failure. I'd moved back home to my old room with its faded movie posters and the shelf that still held my high school trophies. A temporary solution, we all said, just until I got back on my feet, but months bled into months. Resumes disappeared into a silent online void. Interviews led to polite rejections. The savings account I'd been so proud of dwindled to almost nothing. I tried to help. I cooked. I cleaned. I fixed the squeaky step on the staircase. But with every passing week, I could feel the space I occupied in my own home shrinking. I became quieter, more careful. I tried to make myself small, to take up less air, less room, less worry. That Christmas Eve, I'd wrapped the few gifts I could afford: a nice scarf for Mom, a book for Dad with so much care. I thought maybe around the table, with the good silverware and the familiar traditions, the tension would melt away. I thought we could just be a family again without the unspoken question hanging over us. When are you leaving? We ate in near silence, the clink of forks the only conversation. The food tasted like ash in my mouth. I could feel my dad's eyes on his plate. My mother's posture was rigid, a straight line of withheld words. I made a comment, a stupid, simple thing. I think I said the potatoes were good. I was just trying to fill the quiet. My mom put her fork down. The sound was final, like a judge's gavel. She looked at me not with anger, but with a cold, exhausted disappointment that was so much worse. "I'm glad you like them," she said, her voice too calm. "It's nice you can enjoy a meal." I didn't say anything, I just waited. She took a slow breath. "Do you have any idea what it's like?" she asked, and now her voice started to fray at the edges. "To watch you just exist here, to see every day that you're not trying." "I am trying," I whispered, the words sticking in my throat. "Trying what?" Her voice rose, sharp and clear, cutting through the festive air. "Trying to see how long you can live off of us. We are tired. I am tired. Every day you are a reminder of what you haven't done. Every day you are another weight." My father said, "Honey, please, it's Christmas." But she was looking only at me. All the months of quiet worry, of hidden frustration, of shared disappointment crystallized into one single, perfect, terrible sentence. "You are a burden," she said, each word deliberate and clean, like a knife sliced through butter. "A constant burden. I need you to get out." The room didn't spin, it just stopped. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The smell of turkey turned sickly sweet. I looked at my dad. He looked down at his hands, folded in his lap. That was my answer. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, not then. A strange, cold numbness washed over me. I just stood up, my chair scraping softly on the floor. I walked out of the dining room, past the twinkling tree, and up the stairs to the room that was no longer mine. I took my old backpack from the closet. I put in a couple of sweaters, some socks, my toothbrush. I saw the scarf and book still wrapped on my dresser. I left them there. I came back downstairs. They were still at the table, not eating, not speaking. I walked past the doorway, put on my coat and boots by the front door. My mother's voice came from the dining room, quieter now, drained. "Where will you go?" I didn't have an answer. I just opened the door. The cold night air hit my face, a shocking slap after the house's warmth. And then I knew. I zipped my coat, hoisted my backpack, and stepped out into the silent, holy night. I was going to the bus station. I was going to Grandma S. The cold that night was the kind that doesn't just chill your skin, it seeps into your bones and makes a home there. Each breath I took hung in the air like a ghost of the warmth I'd just left behind. My street, usually so familiar, looked different under the Christmas Eve stillness. Every house was lit up with colored lights and glowing windows. I could see shadows of families moving around trees, laughing, sharing meals. It was a postcard of everything I'd just lost. I walked, my boots crunching on the frozen sidewalk. The sound was too loud in the quiet. I felt like I was moving through a dream or maybe walking out of one. The numbness from the house was starting to wear off, replaced by a deep, trembling shock. You are a burden. The words played on a loop in my head, synchronized with my footsteps. Get out. I had no plan. My phone was in my pocket, but who could I call? My friends were all in their own lives, in their own cities, celebrating with their own families. I couldn't bring myself to speak the shameful truth out loud. My mom kicked me out on Christmas, so I just walked toward the main road, toward the dim, fluorescent glow of the bus station a mile away. My grandma lived about 3 hours away by bus in a small town that felt like it existed in another century. Her little blue house, with its wraparound porch and the giant magnolia tree in the front yard, was my childhood sanctuary. Summers there were long and golden, filled with the smell of lemonade and freshly cut grass. She was my dad's mom, a quiet woman with gentle hands and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She and my mom had never been particularly close. Mom thought Grandma was too soft on me, too old-fashioned. Grandma never said a word against my mom, but she'd always give me an extra long hug when we visited, as if she knew I needed to store them up. But I hadn't seen her in almost a year. Not since before the layoff, when my life was still on what I thought was the right track. I'd called less and less as my situation worsened, too embarrassed to admit I was circling the drain. The last time we spoke, maybe 2 months ago, I'd told her everything was fine, just figuring things out. Now I was showing up on Christmas Eve with a half-empty backpack and a shattered heart. The bus station was a lonely island of light. It was nearly empty. A man in a heavy coat slept on a bench, a battered suitcase at his feet. A station attendant behind thick glass looked up from a book, gave me a tired nod. I went to the ticket counter, my fingers stiff with cold. "One ticket to Cedar Brook," I said, my voice rough. The attendant tapped on a keyboard. "Last bus tonight leaves in 40 minutes. Gets in around 11. That okay? 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve." I nodded and fumbled for my nearly maxed out credit card. The transaction went through with a soft beep that felt like a point of no return. I took the thin paper ticket and found a bench as far from the sleeping man as I could. This is where the feeling really started to hit, sitting on that hard, plastic bench under the two bright lights, holding a ticket to my only refuge. The weight of it all pressed down on me. The job loss wasn't my fault, everyone had said so. But the staying, the becoming a burden that was on me, I'd let it happen. I'd seen the looks, heard the tense silences, and I'd just kept hoping for a miracle to save me from the hard work of saving myself. My mom's words were cruel, but were they wrong? Hot tears welled up, and I bent my head, letting them fall silently onto the dirty station floor. I cried for the lost job, for the emptied bank account, for the disappointment in my father's eyes, and for the woman who birthed me who now saw me as a weight she needed to cut loose. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes and a blast of diesel fumes. It was only half full. I showed my ticket to the driver, a woman with a kind smile who said, "Long night, huh? Merry Christmas anyway." Her small kindness almost broke me all over again. I found a window seat near the back. As the bus pulled out of the station and left my town behind, I watched my world shrink in the dark window. We passed my street, a blur of cheerful lights from a distance. I put my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes. For the next 3 hours, I was nowhere, suspended between a home that didn't want me and a hope that might not be there. What if Grandma wasn't home? What if she was at a friend's for the holiday? What if she opened the door and saw the failure standing on her porch? The doubt was a physical sickness in my stomach. The bus ride was a blur of dark highways and the occasional glow of a distant town. People got on and off, carrying their own stories, their own parcels. I just stared out into the blackness, the hum of the engine the only thing holding my thoughts at bay. Finally, the driver's voice came over the speaker, gentle and crackly. "Cedar Brook, next stop." My heart began to pound. The bus slowed, turning off the highway onto the familiar, tree-lined road that led into town. Cedar Brook looked like a Christmas village. White lights twinkled in every shop window on Main Street. Big, lit-up trees stood in the town square. It was beautiful, and it felt completely separate from the reality of my life. The bus came to a stop in front of a small, closed pharmacy that served as the station. The doors hissed open. The cold here was cleaner, sharper, smelling of pine and wood smoke. End of the line for you, sweetheart, the driver said. You got someone picking you up. My grandma, I said, my voice a dry whisper. She lives close. Well, you give her my best. Merry Christmas. I stepped off the bus into the silent, freezing street. The bus pulled away, its taillights disappearing around a corner, leaving me in profound quiet. I knew the way. It was a 15-minute walk from here. I pulled my coat tight, shouldered my backpack, and started walking. The town was so still. Through living room windows, I could see the blue flicker of televisions tuned to Christmas movies, the warm shapes of people together. My boots echoed on the pavement. With every step, my anxiety grew. What was I doing? This was a mistake. I should turn around, but turn around to what? And then I saw it. At the end of Maple Lane, the little blue house, and there in the front window was a soft golden glow. The porch light was on. That porch light was a small yellow star in my dark universe. It didn't mean everything was okay, but it meant a door was there and it was unlocked. My grandma always left the porch light on until she went to bed, a habit from when my grandfather was alive and worked late shifts. Seeing it now, on this night of all nights, felt like a message meant just for me. I stood at the foot of the walkway, my feet frozen to the spot. The house looked exactly the same. The wide porch with its two rocking chairs, now bundled in canvas for the winter. The big magnolia tree, its bare branches like delicate lace against the night sky. The glow from the front window was from her living room lamp, the one with the stained glass shade that threw little colored dots on the walls. All the courage that had gotten me on the bus seemed to drain out through my soles into the frozen ground. What was my opening line? Merry Christmas, I'm homeless. I felt like a ghost about to haunt a place that held only good memories. I was about to stain this peaceful place with my own mess. I must have stood there for 5 full minutes, shivering. Finally, the thought of the deepening cold pushed me forward. My legs were stiff as I walked up the 3 porch steps. The wood creaked a familiar greeting. I stood before the dark green door with its brass knocker shaped like a seashell. I lifted the knocker and let it fall. The sound was too loud in the sleeping street. Silence. Then from inside, a soft shuffle of feet. A shadow moved behind the curtain on the door's window. My breath caught. The door opened, not all the way, just a crack with the chains still on. My grandma's face, soft and lined, appeared in the gap. She was wearing her favorite rose patterned housecoat. Her white hair was in its usual loose bun. She peered out, her eyes squinting without her glasses. Yes, can I help you? She asked, her voice gentle but cautious. It was the "can I help you" that broke the last dam inside me. She didn't recognize me. I was just a stranger knocking on her door late on Christmas Eve. Grandma, I choked out. The word was thick with tears I couldn't hold back anymore. It's me. There was a sharp intake of breath. The door closed for a second. I heard the metallic slide of the chain. Then it opened fully, flooding the porch with warm lamplight. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes, now wide and worried behind her glasses, which she must have grabbed, looked me up and down, my red, wind-burned face, my backpack, the sheer lostness of my posture. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered, not a question. Not a demand for an explanation, just a statement of heartbreak for whatever had brought me here. She opened her arms. I stumbled over the threshold and into them. She smelled like lavender powder and the faint, sweet smell of the apple pie I now noticed on the counter in the kitchen. It was the smell of safety, of a love that had no conditions. I buried my face in her soft housecoat and sobbed, great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the entire bus ride, for the dinner table, for the months of quiet despair. She didn't shush me or tell me it was okay. She just held me tightly, one hand cradling the back of my head like she did when I was small, and let me fall apart on her shoulder. When the storm finally began to pass, leaving me hiccuping and drained, she guided me inside and shut the door against the cold. She took my backpack and coat, hanging them carefully on the old hall tree as if they weren't carrying the weight of my ruined life. "Come sit by the fire," she said softly, taking my icy hand in her warm, papery one. Her living room was a time capsule of comfort. The same floral sofa, the Afghan blanket draped over the back. A small, real fir tree stood in the corner, decorated simply with old glass ornaments and strings of popcorn. A fire crackled softly in the brick fireplace. It was the opposite of my parents' perfectly styled, tense house. This was lived in, this was peace. She sat me on the sofa and tucked the Afghan around my legs. "I'll make us some tea." I watched her pad into the kitchen, listening to the familiar sounds of the kettle being filled, the clink of cups. I felt hollowed out, empty of tears, but full of a heavy, aching shame. She came back with a tray holding two steaming mugs of chamomile tea and two small plates with slices of the apple pie. She set it on the coffee table and sat beside me, turning her body to face me. She didn't say, "What happened?" She didn't say, "Why are you here?" She simply placed her hand over mine on the Afghan and waited. Her quiet patience gave me the space to find the words. Mom and I started, my voice raspy. We had a fight at dinner. I stared into the fire, unable to look at her. She said I was a burden. She told me to get out. I heard her soft sigh. It wasn't a sigh of surprise, but of deep sadness. She squeezed my hand. "So you came here," she said. "I didn't know where else to go." The confession was a whisper. "This is exactly where you should have come," she said, her voice firm. "This is always where you can come." She let that sit in the air for a moment. "Are you hungry? You must be. The pie is good, but let me make you a proper plate." "I'm not really hungry, Grandma. You will be, just a little." She got up again and went back to the kitchen. She returned with a plate holding turkey, mashed potatoes, and green beans, leftovers from her own small, solitary Christmas dinner. The normality of it, the care in it, made my throat tighten again. I ate because she had made it for me, and with the first bite, I realized I was starving. I hadn't eaten a thing at that fateful dinner. I ate quietly as she sipped her tea and watched the fire. When I was finished, she took the plate. "You are exhausted. We can talk more in the morning, or never if that's what you need. But for tonight, you are safe and you are loved. That's all you need to know." She led me upstairs to the small guest room. It was the room that had always been mine. The white chenille bedspread, the vanity table with the slightly wobbly leg, the faded wallpaper with tiny blue flowers. A wave of such profound nostalgia hit me it was like a physical ache. This room had witnessed summer dreams, the plotting of childish adventures. Now it was a refuge for a broken adult. "Your old pajamas might still be in the bottom drawer," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "Probably a bit small, but they'll do. Bathroom's just the same. Get some sleep." She leaned in and kissed my forehead. "I am so glad you're here." After she left, I found the old flannel pajamas. They were indeed too short at the wrists and ankles, but wearing them was like being hugged by my younger, more hopeful self. I washed my face in the little pink-tiled bathroom, looking at my red, swollen eyes in the mirror. I didn't look like a burden. I just looked like a very tired, very lost person. I crawled into the bed. The sheets were cold, but smelled faintly of the lavender sachets she kept in the linen closet. I lay there in the dark, listening to the old house settle. A floorboard creaked downstairs. The wind whispered against the window pane. The fire downstairs crackled softly. The words "you are a burden" tried to echo in the quiet, but they were fainter here, muffled by the scent of lavender and apple pie, by the memory of a hug that asked for nothing. For the first time all night, my body began to unclench. The numbness was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness, but also by the first fragile filament of something else, safety. I wasn't okay, far from it, but I was here. And here, for tonight, was enough to build a dream on. As sleep finally pulled me under, my last thought was a simple one. The bus had brought me to the right place. I woke to the smell of bacon and the soft, gray light of a Christmas morning filtering through the frost fern patterns on the window. For one blissful, sleepy moment, I didn't remember. I was just a kid again, waking up in my grandma's house on Christmas, the promise of a day full of magic and a stocking at the foot of the bed. Then it all rushed back. The dinner, the words, the bus. The heavy weight settled back onto my chest, but it was different now. It wasn't the sharp, panicked weight of last night. It was a dull, accepted ache. I was here. This was my reality now. I could hear my grandma moving around downstairs, the gentle clatter of a pan, the hum of the radio playing softly, probably a station of Christmas carols. The normalcy of the sounds was both a comfort and a strange kind of pain. Life was going on, her life, and I was now an unexpected part of it. I got up, my body stiff and tired as if I'd run a marathon. I folded the two small pajamas and put on the same clothes from yesterday. They felt like a costume from another life. I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror. The tiredness was still there, deep in my eyes, but the raw panic was gone. I walked downstairs slowly, the old wooden steps creaking their familiar song under my weight. Grandma was in the kitchen, tending to a skillet of sizzling bacon. She turned when she heard me, and her face lit up with a smile that held no shadow, no hesitation. "Merry Christmas, sleepyhead," she said, as if my arrival in the middle of the night was the most planned for event in the world. I thought we could have a proper breakfast. Help me set the table. Her ease was a balm. She wasn't tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. She was just making breakfast. I nodded, a small, fragile smile touching my lips. Okay. I went to the familiar cupboard and took out two plates, the everyday ones with the little blue rim. I set them on the small kitchen table by the window, adding forks, knives, napkins. I poured 2 glasses of orange juice from the pitcher she had ready. It was a simple domestic ritual, and doing it with her in this quiet kitchen steadied something inside me. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was delicious: crispy bacon, fluffy scrambled eggs, buttery toast. Tasted like care. Finally, Grandma put down her fork. She looked at me, her gaze kind and direct. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," she began. "But if you'd like to talk, I'm here to listen, not to judge, just to listen." The invitation was so gentle, it opened a door I'd kept locked tight. It wasn't an interrogation, it was an offer. And sitting in the safe harbor of her kitchen, the words began to spill out, not in a dramatic torrent, but in a slow, sad trickle. I told her about losing the job, the initial shock, the stupid belief that I'd find something else quickly. I told her about the slow drain of confidence as rejection after rejection piled up. I described the atmosphere at home, the way my dad would ask any news, with a hopefulness that grew more hollow each time, and the way my mother's silence grew louder and colder. I tried to make myself useful, I said, pushing eggs around my plate. I did all the chores, I cooked dinner, but it was like nothing I did was the right thing. The right thing was to not be there anymore, to be a success somewhere else, and I just couldn't. "And your mother," Grandma said softly. Last night, I took a deep breath. She just finally said it out loud, what everyone had been thinking, that I was weighing them down, that my presence was a constant problem. My voice dropped to a whisper. She said I was a burden, and she told me to get out. Grandma was quiet for a long time. She looked out the window at her frost-covered backyard. "Your mother," she said finally, "is a woman who is very afraid." That wasn't what I expected to hear. I expected condemnation, or at least comfort that dismissed my mom as cruel, but not this. "Afraid," I echoed. Grandma nodded, turning her gentle eyes back to me. "She loves you. I know that might be hard to believe right now, but she does. She's just always been terrified of things falling apart, of not being in control. She planned her life and she planned yours from the moment you were born. The right schools, the right career, the right kind of life. Your detour, it doesn't fit the plan. And when things don't go to plan, your mother doesn't see a puzzle to solve. She sees a catastrophe." She sipped her juice. It doesn't excuse what she said. Words like that, they leave a mark. But understanding why sometimes helps you carry the weight of them. She wasn't speaking from a place of hatred. She was speaking from a place of a fear that is now, I imagine, consumed her with regret. I thought about my mom's rigid posture, her need for everything to be just so. I remembered her anxiety before parent-teacher conferences, before big family events. Grandma was right. Control was her armor. My unemployment was a crack in that armor, and she didn't know how to fix it, so she wanted to remove the source of the crack. Me. "What do I do now?" The question came out small and lost. Grandma reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Now, you finish your breakfast. Then, if you'd like, we can open the little presents I have under the tree. After that, you take a long, hot shower. You rest. You let yourself be here, and you let yourself be sad or angry or whatever you need to be. For today, that is your only job." Tears pricked my eyes again, but they were softer tears. "I can't just stay here and do nothing, Grandma. I've been doing nothing for months." "You're not doing nothing," she said firmly. "You're healing, you're gathering your pieces. There is a time for action and there is a time for recovery. You have been in a battle you didn't even fully see. Last night was a terrible wound. You don't ask a soldier with a fresh wound to run back into the fight, you tend to them first." Her wisdom was so simple, so profound. I had been fighting rejection, fighting shame, fighting to just get through each day. And last night I had been shattered. "Okay," I whispered. Okay, after breakfast, we did just as she said. We moved to the living room. She handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. It was a new pair of wool-lined gloves and a matching hat, soft and dark blue. "I always worry about your hands getting cold," she said simply. I had gotten her a framed photo of the two of us from a summer visit years ago, but it was sitting unwrapped back in my old room at my parents' house. The guilt of having nothing for her was sharp. Grandma. I didn't bring your gift. I'm so sorry. She shushed me, pulling me into a side hug as we sat on the sofa. You being here is the only gift I wanted, truly. We sat and watched the fire for a while, not talking much. The quiet was full, not empty. My mind kept drifting back to my parents' house. Were they opening gifts? Was my mother crying? Was my father pretending to read the paper? The image hurt, but it was a distant hurt, like watching a sad movie about someone else's life. Later, under the hot stream of the shower in her little bathroom, I let the events of the last 24 hours wash over me. I cried again, quiet tears mixed with the shower water, mourning the loss of the family Christmas I'd hoped for, the version of myself that had a plan and a future. I washed my hair with her rose-scented shampoo and felt, for the first time, a tiny sense of cleansing more than just dirt from my skin. Wrapped in a towel standing in the steamy bathroom, I looked at my foggy reflection. You are here, I told myself. You are safe. Today, that is enough. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a plan, but it was a foundation, and after months of free falling, it felt solid beneath my feet. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a quiet, slow blur. It was the most undemanding day I'd had in months. There was no pressure to be cheerful, no need to perform gratitude, no silent clock ticking in the background counting the hours I was unemployed. Grandma moved through her routines, watering her houseplants, tidying the kitchen, knitting by the fire, and I was simply allowed to exist alongside her. I helped her make a simple dinner, a chicken soup from scratch. I chopped carrots and celery while she simmered the broth. It was meditative. The simple task of creating something nourishing with no expectation attached felt like a small act of rebuilding. As we ate our soup by the fire that evening, the unspoken question of what next began to hover in the room. My phone, which I had kept on silent since leaving, felt like a brick in my pocket. I knew it held a world of unresolved pain, texts, missed calls, voicemails, a connection to the life that had expelled me. Have you looked at your phone today? Grandma asked as if reading my thoughts. I shook my head, staring into my bowl. I'm scared to. That's understandable, she said, but you are safe here. Whatever is on there, it can't hurt you in this room, and you don't have to respond to any of it tonight. But knowing, sometimes the not knowing is heavier than the knowing. She was right. The dread of the unknown messages was a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. I took a deep breath, pulled my phone from my pocket, and powered it on. It buzzed and chimed relentlessly as notifications flooded in. My stomach twisted. The first texts were from my dad, sent last night. 9:47 p.m. Sweetheart, please call us. Tell us where you are. 10:30 p.m. Your mother is very upset. We are both worried. Are you safe? 11:15 p.m. Please, just a word. Then this morning, 8:05 a.m. Merry Christmas. We love you. Please call. There was a voicemail from him, too. I put the phone on speaker so Grandma could hear, my hands trembling. His voice sounded old and tired. Hey kiddo, it's Dad. I don't even know what to say. What happened? It shouldn't have happened. We are so sorry. Your mom, she's not herself. She's in our room. She hasn't come out. Please let us know you're okay. Call me back on my cell anytime. I love you. The message ended. The room felt quieter afterward. Then there were the messages from my mother. They started late last night after I'd already gone to sleep at Grandma's. 1:17 a.m. I don't know if you'll read this. 1:19 a.m. I was wrong. 1:23 a.m. Please come home. Then a single voicemail left at 2 a.m. Her voice was raw, stripped of all its usual controlled certainty. It was the voice of someone in a dark room, utterly alone. It's me, the recording began, followed by a long, shaky breath. I am so sorry, the words I said. I can't take them back. I wish I could. I didn't mean them. I was scared and tired, and I took it all out on you. You are not a burden. You are my child. I didn't know how to help you, and it made me feel like a failure. So I said the most terrible thing to make the feeling stop. It was cruel. It was unforgivable. I don't expect you to forgive me, but please let us know you're safe. Your father is worried sick. I am broken. Please. The message cut off. A sob had caught in her throat at the end. I sat there, the phone in my hand, tears streaming silently down my face. I had wanted her to hurt. I had wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused. But hearing her completely shattered, didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it might. It just made everything sadder and more complicated. Grandma had listened quietly, her knitting resting in her lap. She sighed, a sound of profound sorrow. Oh, my dear ones, she murmured, more to herself than to me. What do I do? I asked, my voice barely audible. You don't have to do anything tonight, she said again, her anchor like calm steadying me. But when you are ready, you should tell them you are safe. It is a kindness they do not deserve, but it is a kindness you can give for your own peace and for theirs. She was right. The weight of their worry was now added to my own bundle of pain. I couldn't carry it. I typed out a text to my dad. I kept it simple, factual, devoid of emotion. I am safe. I am at grandma's. I need some time. Please don't come here. I hit send before I could overthink it. The response was almost instantaneous. Thank God. Thank you for telling us. We won't come. Take all the time you need. We love you. A minute later, another text, this one from my mother's number. Thank you. I am so sorry. I didn't reply to that one. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. The act of sending that one text had drained me completely. Good, Grandma said. That was a brave thing to do. It doesn't feel brave, it just feels hard. Most brave things are, she said with a small smile. Now you've done enough emotional labor for one day. How about a game of cards, or we could watch one of those old musicals you used to love? We ended up watching White Christmas on her small TV. I drifted in and out of sleep on the sofa, my head leaning against a cushion, lulled by the familiar songs and the crackle of the fire. Grandma covered me with the Afghan at some point. As I hovered in that half-awake state, my mind drifted back to my childhood. I remembered a time when I was maybe 7 or 8. I had fallen off my bike and scraped my knees badly. I'd run crying into the house. My mother had been in the middle of preparing for a dinner party. She looked at my bloody knees, her face a mask of stress. For heaven's sake, I don't have time for this right now, she'd said, her voice sharp. She cleaned me up quickly, efficiently, but her touch was hurried, her focus on the clock. It was my dad who later sat with me on the porch, telling me silly stories while we watched the sunset, making the pain fade. The memory was a small, sad clue. My mother's love had always been there, but it was often conditional on things going according to plan. A scraped knee was a disruption. A lost job was a cataclysm. Her way of dealing with disruption was to try and fix it, control it, or eliminate it. When she couldn't fix my unemployment, she tried to eliminate the source of her anxiety, my presence. It wasn't about love, it was about coping. Understanding that didn't erase the sting of her words, but it gave them a context that made them slightly less personal. They were about her failure to cope, not about my failure as a person. That night, as I lay in the guest bed again, I didn't feel the crushing despair of the night before. I felt a deep, weary sadness, a mourning for the mother I wished I had in that moment, the one who would have opened her arms, not her door. But I also felt a new, tiny seed of something. Maybe it was clarity, or maybe it was just the beginning of acceptance. Acceptance that my path forward would not include the simple, unconditional safety of my childhood home. That safety, I was realizing, had been an illusion I'd clung to. Real safety, it seemed, was having one person who, without grand gestures or perfect understanding, simply made room for you when you had nowhere else to go. And for now, that was enough. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a quiet, slow blur. It was the most undemanding day I'd had in months. There was no pressure to be cheerful, no need to perform gratitude, no silent clock ticking in the background counting the hours I was unemployed. Grandma moved through her routines, watering her houseplants, tidying the kitchen, knitting by the fire, and I was simply allowed to exist alongside her. I felt no need to explain my silence or my sad stares into the flames. She offered the gift of her presence without demanding mine in return. I helped her make a simple dinner, a chicken soup from scratch. I chopped carrots and celery while she simmered the broth. It was meditative. The simple task of creating something nourishing with no expectation attached felt like a small act of rebuilding. My hands, which had felt useless for so long, were doing something good. They were making food. They were helping. In this small kitchen, I was not a burden. I was a pair of hands peeling vegetables. The difference was profound in its simplicity. You always were a good chopper, Grandma said, watching me. Even as a little thing, you'd sit on that stool and help me snap the green beans. You had such serious focus. I managed a smile. I liked the sound they made when they snapped. You did, she nodded, her eyes warm. It's the little things. That was her wisdom. It was never about the big speeches or the dramatic advice. It was in the noticing, the remembering of a child who liked the snap of a bean. As we ate our soup by the fire that evening, the unspoken question of what next began to hover in the room like wood smoke. My phone, which I had kept on silent and buried in my backpack since leaving, felt like a live wire I was avoiding. I knew it held a world of unresolved pain, texts, missed calls, voicemails, a digital tether to the life that had expelled me. To look at it felt like picking at a wound that was just beginning to clot. Have you looked at your phone today? Grandma asked softly, as if reading my thoughts over the rim of her soup bowl. I shook my head, staring into my own bowl where a lone piece of carrot floated. I'm scared to. That's perfectly understandable, she said, placing her spoon down carefully. But you are safe here in this chair in this room. Whatever is on that phone, it is just words on a screen. They can't reach you here unless you let them. And you don't have to respond to any of it tonight, not a single bit, but sometimes. Sometimes the not knowing is a heavier burden than the knowing. The imagination can paint pictures far worse than reality. She was right. The dread of the unknown messages was a constant, low-grade hum in my veins, more exhausting than facing the truth. I took a deep, shuddering breath that seemed to come from the soles of my feet. I got up, retrieved the phone from my backpack, and held its cold, dark shape in my palm. I carried it back to the sofa like it was a venomous creature. I sat down, curled my legs under me, and powered it on. It buzzed and chimed relentlessly, a frantic digital bird trapped in my hand. The screen lit up with a cascade of notifications. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. The first texts were from my dad, sent last night, a timeline of escalating worry. 9:47 p.m. Sweetheart, please call us. Tell us where you are. Let's talk about this. 10:30 p.m. Your mother is very upset. We are both worried. Are you safe? Just one word, 11:15 p.m. The bus station said the last bus went to Cedar Brook. Are you at Grandma's? Please, just a word. Then this morning, a different tone, pleading, fragile. 8:05 a.m. Merry Christmas. We love you. Please call when you can. 12:30 p.m. I've called your grandma's landline twice, but it just rings. Is she not home? Are you there? There was a voicemail icon next to his name. My finger hovered over it. I looked at Grandma. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. I put the phone on speaker, set it on the coffee table between us, and pressed play. His voice sounded old and tired, stripped of its usual cheerful boom. Hey kiddo, it's Dad. I don't even know what to say. What happened at that table? It shouldn't have happened. We are so sorry. Your mom, she's not herself. She's in our room. She hasn't come out all morning. She won't speak to me. Please let us know you're okay. Call me back on my cell anytime, day or night. I love you so much. The message ended with a click. The room felt quieter, heavier afterward. The crackle of the fire was the only sound. Then there were the messages from my mother. They started late last night after I'd already gone to sleep in the safety of the blue bedroom. 1:17 a.m. I don't know if you'll read this. 1:19 a.m. I was wrong. 1:23 a.m. Please come home. Then a single voicemail left at 2 a.m. Her voice was raw, stripped of all its usual controlled certainty. It was the voice of someone in a dark room, utterly alone, speaking to the void. It's me, the recording began, followed by a long, shaky breath that rattled through the speaker. I am so sorry. The words I said, I can't take them back. I wish I could. I would give anything to take them back. I didn't mean them, not in my heart. I was scared and tired, and I felt like I was drowning watching you struggle. I took it all out on you. You are not a burden. You could never be a burden. You are my child. I didn't know how to help you, and it made me feel like a failure, a terrible mother. So I said the most terrible thing I could think of to make the feeling stop. To push the failure away. It was cruel. It was unforgivable. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't, but please let us know you're safe. Your father is worried sick. I am broken. Please. The message cut off. A sob had caught in her throat at the end, severing the connection. I sat there, staring at the black screen of the phone, tears streaming silently down my face. I had wanted her to hurt. In the raw, wounded animal part of my heart, I had wanted her to feel a fraction of the eviscerating pain she'd caused. But hearing her voice so utterly shattered, didn't bring the cold satisfaction I thought it might. It didn't feel like justice. It just made the whole terrible situation sadder, more complicated, more hopeless. Now there were two broken people, connected by a thread of shared pain. Grandma had listened quietly, her knitting resting forgotten in her lap. She sighed, a sound of profound sorrow that seemed to hold decades of family complexities. Oh, my dear ones, she murmured, more to herself than to me. All this pain, what do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, ragged from crying. I don't know what to do with all of this. You don't have to do anything with it tonight, she said again, her anchor like a stark contrast to the storm on the phone. The messages aren't going anywhere, but when you are ready, and only when you are ready, you should tell them you are safe. It is a kindness they do not deserve at this moment, but it is a kindness you can give. For your own peace and for theirs, carrying their worry on top of your own hurt is too much for anyone. She was right. The weight of their imagined terrors of me alone on the streets, hurt in danger, was now added to my own bundle of pain. I couldn't carry it. I didn't want to. With trembling fingers, I picked up the phone. I navigated to my dad's text thread. I typed out a message. I kept it simple, factual, devoid of emotion. It was all I could manage. I am safe. I am at grandma's. I need some time. Please don't come here. I stared at the words for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the send button. It felt like opening a door just a crack, and I was terrified of what might try to push through. I took another breath and hit send. The response was almost instantaneous. Three dots appeared, then his reply: "Thank God, thank you for telling us. We won't come. Take all the time you need. We love you so much." A minute later, another text, this one from my mother's number, just 2 words: "Thank you." Then a minute after that, a second one: "I am so sorry. I didn't reply to those. I couldn't." The well of words for her was dry and dark. I put my phone face down on the coffee table, the finality of the thump a period on the conversation. The act of sending that one text had drained me completely. I felt hollowed out like a spent shell. "Good," Grandma said softly. "That was a brave thing to do." "It doesn't feel brave," I said, leaning my head back against the sofa and closing my eyes. "It just feels hard and sad. Most brave things are," she said with a small, knowing smile. "Now you've done enough emotional labor for one day. Your job is done. How about we shift gears completely? A game of cards, rummy, or we could watch one of those old musicals you used to love. I think the one with the snow is on." We ended up watching White Christmas on her small, boxy TV. The vibrant colors and cheerful songs were a surreal contrast to my inner world, but that was the point. I drifted in and out of sleep on the sofa, my head leaning against a soft cushion, lulled by the familiar harmonies and the steady crackle of the fire. At some point, Grandma got up and covered me with the heavy, crocheted afghan. Its weight was comforting. As I hovered in that half-awake state, my mind, unmoored from conscious control, drifted back to my childhood. I remembered a specific time when I was maybe 7 or 8. I had been trying to learn to ride my bike without training wheels on the sidewalk in front of our old house. I fell hard, scraping both knees and the palms of my hands on the rough cement. The pain was sharp and shocking. I ran wailing into the house, blood trickling down my shins. My mother had been in the middle of a frantic preparation for a dinner party for my dad's boss. The kitchen was a mess of fancy ingredients, and she was wearing a good dress with an apron over it. She looked at my bloody knees, her face a mask of stress and annoyance. "For heaven's sake, I don't have time for this right now," she'd said, her voice sharp with panic. "Can't you be more careful?" She'd clean me up quickly, efficiently, with peroxide that stung and brisk wipes of a cloth. But her touch was hurried, her focus on the clock on the wall. She'd stuck band-aids on me and sent me to my room to be quiet and read until the guests arrived. It was my dad who, after the party, found me still sniffling in my bed. He didn't say much. He just sat with me on the porch swing, telling me silly stories about his own childhood biking disasters while we watched the fireflies come out, making the pain and the feeling of being a nuisance slowly fade. The memory was a small, sad clue clicking into place now. My mother's love had always been there, but it was often conditional on things going smoothly, according to her plan. A scraped knee was a disruption to a perfect evening. A lost job was a cataclysm to a perfect life narrative. Her way of dealing with disruption was to try and fix it, control it, or eliminate it. When she couldn't fix my unemployment, when she couldn't control the trajectory of my life, her panic translated into the only action she felt she had left. She tried to eliminate the source of her own anxiety, which was my visible, daily presence. It wasn't about love, not in that moment at the table. It was about a catastrophic failure to cope. Understanding that didn't erase the sting of her words. The wound was still deep and real, but it gave them a context that made them slightly less personal. They were a reflection of her own brokenness, her own limitations, not a final verdict on my worth. That night, as I lay in the familiar chenille-covered bed once more, I didn't feel the crushing, suffocating despair of the previous night. I felt a deep, weary sadness, a mourning for the mother I wished I had in that moment, the one who would have opened her arms instead of her door, the one whose love felt like a shelter, not a performance review. But I also felt a new, tiny seed of something. It was fragile, no bigger than a mustard seed. Maybe it was clarity, or maybe it was just the beginning of acceptance. Acceptance that my path forward, whenever I found it, would not include the simple, unconditional safety of my childhood home. That safety, I was realizing, had been an illusion I'd clung to long after it had faded. Real safety, it seemed, wasn't a perfect place free from trouble. It was having one person who, without grand gestures or perfect understanding, simply made room for you at their table and in their quiet heart when you had nowhere else to go. And for now, in this dark, quiet room smelling of lavender and old wood, that was enough. The days after Christmas fell into a new, soft rhythm. It was a rhythm built around Grandma's quiet life, and I became a gentle echo in her space. I woke up without an alarm to the sound of birds at the feeder outside the kitchen window. I helped with the dishes after our simple meals. I learned the specific way she liked the towels folded. In the afternoons, while she napped in her armchair with her knitting on her lap, I would sit on the porch wrapped in the blanket she'd given me, just watching the bare branches of the magnolia tree sway in the winter wind. My phone stayed mostly silent. My dad texted once a day, just a simple thinking of you, love, Dad. I replied with a heart emoji. It was a thread, thin but unbroken. My mother did not text again. Her silence was its own kind of message, heavy with shame, waiting. I found I preferred it to more words. The words we had were already too many. I was resting, as Grandma had prescribed, but a body and mind can only rest for so long before they start to itch with the need to do. The deep freeze of shock had thawed, leaving behind a muddy field of questions. What was I going to do? I couldn't live on Grandma's sofa forever. The thought of job hunting again filled me with a tired dread so profound it felt like a physical weight. The memory of all those rejections was a fresh bruise. One morning, about 4 days after Christmas, Grandma handed me a mug of tea and said, "The library in town is open today. I have some books to return. Would you like to take a walk and drop them off for me? The air might do you good." It wasn't a push. It was an invitation back into the world, a tiny, safe mission. I agreed. Cedar Brook's library was a small, red brick building that looked like a house. Inside, it was warm and hushed, smelling of old paper and wood polish. The librarian, a woman with kind eyes and a sweater decorated with cats, smiled at me as I placed Grandma's stack of large print mysteries on the desk. "You must be Aliner's granddaughter," she said. "She mentioned you were visiting. So nice to have you in town." The normality of the interaction, being recognized as someone's visitor, not as a failure or a burden, was strangely uplifting. I wandered the aisles for a while, my fingers trailing over the spines of books. I hadn't read for pleasure in months. My reading had been cover letters, job descriptions, bleak news articles about the economy. I stopped in the nonfiction section. A title caught my eye, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. I pulled it out. On the back, it talked about letting go of who you think you're supposed to be and embracing who you are. A hot lump formed in my throat. I checked it out. That small trip to the library became a turning point. It was a reminder that there was a world outside of my own heartache, a world of small routines and quiet kindness. The next day, I offered to go to the grocery store for Grandma. Walking down the aisles with her list, eggs, bread, a can of soup, felt purposeful. I was useful. I was doing a thing that needed doing. One evening, as we washed the dinner dishes side by side, the warm soapy water soothing my hands, I finally voiced the fear that had been growing. "Grandma, I can't stay here forever," I said, my eyes on the plate I was scrubbing. She didn't miss a beat, rinsing a glass. "No, you can't," she agreed calmly. "But you're not staying forever. You're healing. And when you're healed enough, you'll figure out the next step. There's no clock on this. But the money, I have almost nothing left. I'm using your food, your heat." The old, familiar script of being a burden started to play in my head. She turned off the water and faced me, her hands dripping. "Look at me," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "You are my family. This is what family does. We circle the wagons when someone is hurt. When your grandfather was sick for that long year, did you think he was a burden to me?" I shook my head, remembering how tenderly she had cared for him. "Of course not," she said. It was my privilege to care for him. It is my privilege to care for you now. This is not a transaction. You do not owe me for soup and a warm bed. What you can do when you are able is contribute to the household. You already are. You chop, you clean, you run errands. That is more than enough. The rest is a gift. Let it be one. Her words reframed everything. I wasn't a tenant accruing debt. I was a granddaughter receiving care. The difference was everything. It allowed me to breathe, to accept the shelter without the suffocating shame. That night, I started reading the library book. One line jumped out at me. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. I thought about my story, the laid off employee, the daughter who got kicked out. I had been running from that story for months, pretending it was temporary, hiding from it in my old bedroom. Now, sitting in my grandma's quiet house, I had to own it. This was my reality, but the book also talked about worthiness, the idea that worthiness isn't something you earn by achieving things, it's your birthright. It felt like a foreign concept, but one I desperately wanted to believe. A few days later, on New Year's Eve, Grandma suggested a ritual. Let's write down the things from this year we want to let go of, she said, handing me a small notepad and a pen. Then we'll burn them in the fireplace, not to be dramatic, but to make it concrete. To let the fire take them. It felt silly, but also profoundly right. I went to the guest room and sat on the bed. I stared at the blank page. Then I began to write, my handwriting hurried and messy. The shame of losing my job, the feeling that I am a disappointment, the belief that my value is what I produce, the words, you are a burden, the hope that my parents will save me, the fear that I am broken for good. I filled the small page. I folded it tightly over and over until it was a thick, compact square. Downstairs, Grandma had her own folded paper. She didn't show me hers. We didn't need to share. We stood before the fire she'd built up. You first, she said. I knelt and placed my folded square on a glowing log. For a second, nothing happened. Then a corner caught a tiny orange tongue of flame. It grew, consuming the paper, turning my shameful words into black ash and smoke that vanished up the chimney. I watched until there was nothing left but a smudge of gray on the log. Grandma tossed hers in next. We stood there in silence, watching the flames do their work. The past is allowed to be past, she said softly. It doesn't have to define tomorrow. That night, we stayed up until midnight sipping sparkling cider from her fancy glasses. When the old clock on the mantel chimed 12, she hugged me. Happy New Year, my dear girl. May it be gentle with you. The next morning, January 1st, I woke up with a new feeling. It wasn't a sudden burst of motivation or a clear plan. It was a quiet, solid determination. The rest was over. The healing wasn't complete, but the worst of the bleeding had stopped. It was time to start moving, even if I didn't know the destination. After breakfast, I took my laptop, which had been shut in my backpack since I arrived, and set it up at the kitchen table. The familiar Apple logo felt like staring at the face of an old enemy. My heart hammered as I opened my browser and went to my email. Hundreds of unread messages, newsletters, spam, a few more job rejection auto replies from before Christmas. I deleted them all in a massive cathodic sweep. Inbox 0. Then I opened a new document. I didn't open my resume. I just started typing. I typed about the year. I wrote about the layoff, the fear, the shame, the feeling of being stuck. I wrote about Christmas dinner. I wrote about the bus and the porch light and the smell of lavender. I wrote it all down, not as a cover letter, but as a story for myself to own it. It took hours. I cried a little. Grandma brought me tea and didn't ask a thing. When I finished, I had 10 pages of raw, messy truth. I saved it and closed the laptop. I felt exhausted but lighter. I had faced the monster and I had written down its description. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I took a long walk, not to run an errand, but just to walk. I breathed in the cold, clean air. I looked at the houses, the sky, the way the light slanted through the winter trees. For the first time in months, I was not just a problem to be solved. I was a person walking, and that was enough for now. When I got back, Grandma was in the kitchen making soup again. There's color in your cheeks, she observed. I think, I said, hanging up my coat, that I'm ready to start looking for a job again, but not like before, not desperately, just looking. She smiled, a true, deep smile that reached her eyes. That sounds like a very good plan. The path wasn't clear, the future wasn't certain, but the paralyzing fear was gone. It had been burned away, piece by piece, by a quiet fire, by simple soup, by a love that asked for nothing more than my presence. I had a foundation now, not of money or a job title, but of a simple, unshakable truth. I was worthy of care even when I had nothing to offer in return. And from that foundation, I could begin to rebuild. Looking for a job not desperately turned out to be a completely different experience. Before, every application had been a frantic lifeline, my entire sense of worth tied to the response. Now, sitting at Grandma's kitchen table with my laptop, it felt like an exercise, not in proving myself, but in exploring what might be possible. The fear of rejection was still there, but it was quieter, a background hum instead of a deafening roar. Grandma became my unofficial co pilot. She'd sit in her armchair with her knitting, offering quiet commentary. "That one sounds interesting," she'd say about a bookstore clerk position in the next town over. Or too much travel, about a sales job that required a long commute. She wasn't directing me, she was just bearing witness, which made the lonely process feel shared. I rewrote my resume from scratch. Instead of trying to make my gap in employment disappear, I addressed it simply personal sabbatical to assist family. It was true in its own way. I was assisting her by being there, and she was assisting me by letting me. The truth, stripped of shame, felt powerful. I applied for jobs I would have considered beneath me before part-time work at the local garden center, a receptionist position at the tiny veterinarian's office on Main Street, a weekend barista job at the coffee shop near the library. There was no grand career vision anymore. The vision was simple: earn enough to contribute to Grandma's household, to pay for my own groceries, to start building a small, humble independence right here in this quiet town. A week into January, I got an email, the subject line, "Interview Request Cedar Brook Books." My heart did a little flip. It was for the bookstore clerk position. The interview was set for 2 days later. The old anxiety tried to surge back. What would I wear? What would I say? How would I explain living with my grandmother? But this time I had a new toolkit. I practiced answers with Grandma over tea. What will you say if they ask about the gap in your resume? She asked, her needles clicking softly. "I'll say I took time to be with family and that I'm now excited to re-enter the workforce here in Cedar Brook, a community I've come to love," I said. The words felt honest and clean. "Perfect," she nodded. "That's your story. Stick to it." The morning of the interview, she laid out one of her own simple, beautiful brooches, a small silver leaf on the table beside my breakfast plate. "For luck," she said, "and to remember that you belong here, too." The bookstore was called The Next Chapter. I loved the name. The owner, a woman named Maureen, probably in her 60s, with wild gray hair and bright green glasses, shook my hand firmly. The store smelled like heaven: old paper, new ink, and coffee from a small espresso machine in the corner. The interview wasn't like the corporate grilling I was used to. Maureen asked me about the last book I'd loved. I told her about the Brené Brown book from the library. She asked what section I'd wander to first if left alone in a bookstore. I said, "Fiction always, to see what worlds are on offer." She smiled at that. She did ask about my resume. I gave her my practiced answer, my voice steady. She listened, her head tilted. "Family is important," she said simply. "This job is part-time, not many hours. The pay isn't glamorous, but the people who come in here, they're my community. I need someone who sees it that way too. Not just a job, but a place in the town." "I understand," I said, and I realized I truly did. I wasn't looking for a stepping stone to a better life somewhere else. I was looking for a place to belong right now. I live just down Maple Lane with my grandmother, Alina. This town, it feels like a good place to put down roots, even small ones. Her eyes softened at my grandmother's name. "Alina is a treasure. She buys all her mysteries here." She stood up. "Well, I have a few more people to see, but I'll be in touch by the end of the week. Thank you for coming in." Walking home, I didn't obsess over every word I'd said. I felt calm. I had been myself, a quieter, more fragile self, but myself nonetheless. That was all I could do. 2 days later, Maureen called. I got the job, 15 hours a week, starting the following Monday. When I hung up the phone, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a year. It wasn't a career, it was a job. But it was mine. I had done it, not from a place of panic, but from a place of gradual, tentative strength. Grandma hugged me so tight when I told her. "I knew it, we have to celebrate." She insisted on making a special dinner, her famous pot roast. As we ate, I felt a pride so different from any I'd known before. It wasn't the pride of an achievement that impressed others. It was the pride of a small, green shoot breaking through hard soil after a long winter. The next Saturday, my dad called, not a text, a call. My stomach tightened when I saw his name. Hi, Dad, I answered, walking into the guest room for privacy. Hi, sweetheart. His voice was warm, cautious. How are you? I'm okay. Actually, I got a job at the bookstore in town. There was a pause, then a genuine, hearty smile in his voice. That's wonderful news. Congratulations. Your mom will be so. He trailed off, the sentence dying. Well, we're proud of you. Thanks. The conversation felt stiff, full of landmines we were both avoiding. How's Grandma? He asked. She's great, taking good care of me. I know she is. A long sigh traveled down the line. Listen, your mother, she'd really like to talk to you, to see you, not to explain or anything, just to see that you're okay. Would you consider letting her come for a visit, just her, for a coffee, in town, not at Grandma's, no pressure. The old, instinctive no rose in my throat. But beneath it, something else stirred. The woman in the 2 a.m. voicemail, the broken voice, the mother from my childhood who panicked at scraped knees. I didn't miss her. I wasn't ready for forgiveness. But the idea of her carrying that shattered look forever, it suddenly felt like another burden I was carrying. I need to think about it, I said honestly. That's fair. That's all we can ask. Take your time. We love you. I know. Thanks, Dad. I told Grandma about the call later. She listened, then said, You don't owe her a thing. But sometimes facing the person who hurt you is the final piece of letting the hurt go. Not for them, for you. I thought about it all weekend. While organizing shelves at my new job on Monday, the rhythm of placing books in their proper order, fiction AFGL, gave my mind space to wander. I realized I wasn't afraid of my mother anymore. The worst had already happened. She had said the unsayable, and I had survived. I had found my way to a porch light and a quiet strength I didn't know I had. Seeing her couldn't take that away. That evening, I texted my dad, she can come Saturday afternoon. Meet me at the next chapter at 2, just for coffee. His reply was immediate. Thank you, she'll be there. I didn't tell Maureen it was my mother. I just asked if it was okay if I met someone for a quick coffee in the seating area on my break. Of course, dear, she said. It's a community space. The week passed slowly. I worked my shifts, learning the inventory, helping the occasional customer. The simple tasks were healing. On Saturday, as 2 p.m. approached, a familiar, thick anxiety returned. My hands felt clammy. Grandma had given me a long hug before I left. You have all the power here, she'd reminded me. You set the terms. At 5 minutes to 2, I saw a familiar car, my mom's sedan, pull up and park across the street. My breath caught. She sat in the driver's seat for a long minute, not moving. Then she got out. She looked different, smaller. She was dressed simply, no makeup. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was just hair. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She crossed the street slowly, as if walking against a strong wind, and paused outside the bookstore window. She saw me through the glass. Our eyes met. I saw it then, the sheer, staggering weight of her regret. It was in the slope of her shoulders, in the hesitant, almost fearful way she raised her hand in a small wave. Angry, wounded part of me noted it with cold satisfaction, but the part that had been reading about worthiness and compassion just felt a deep, tired sadness. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders the tiniest bit, and opened the door. The bell above it jingled, a sound so at odds with the gravity of the moment. She walked toward me where I stood behind the counter. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes searching my face, taking in the sight of me in my new apron, in this new place, alive and whole. Hi, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Hi, I said. My own voice was quiet but steady. Let's sit down. We moved to the 2 small armchairs in the bookstore's coffee nook. The space between us felt vast, filled with all the words said and unsaid. Maureen glanced over from where she was ringing up a customer, gave me a subtle, supportive nod, and then busied herself in the back room, giving us privacy. The gentle soundtrack of soft jazz and the hiss of the espresso machine were the only sounds. My mother sat perched on the edge of her chair, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She didn't reach for her purse or try to order a drink. Her entire being was focused on me, a desperate, raw attention that was unnerving. This is a nice place, she finally said, her eyes flickering around at the shelves. It suits you. Thank you, I replied. It was a neutral response, a fact. I was not going to make this easy for her, but I wasn't going to be cruel either. I was just going to be present. The silence stretched again, taut and painful. I got the job last week, I offered, not knowing why I was sharing, maybe just to fill the quiet. It's part-time, but it's good. Your dad told me. She nodded, a jerky movement. I'm really glad. She looked down at her hands, then forced her gaze back to me. You look well. Grandma's taking good care of you. She is. Another pause. I could see her struggling, wrestling with the mountain of apology she'd brought with her, trying to find a path up its side. I don't know how to start, she admitted, her voice cracking on the last word. There's too much, and I'm sorry it feels like nothing. It's dust compared to what I did. I waited. I had nothing to give her, no reassurance, no absolution. This was her journey to make. She took a shuddering breath. That night, after you left, I just sat at the table for hours. Your father tried to talk to me, but I couldn't hear him. All I could hear were my own words echoing. I said them to hurt you. I wanted to push you away because seeing you hurt every day was tearing me apart, and I felt powerless to fix it. A tear escaped, tracing a slow path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I thought if I could just make you angry enough, you'd, I don't know, fight back, get motivated, something. It was the stupidest, most horrible logic in the world. It wasn't about you, it was about me, my failure, my inability to handle things when they aren't perfect. Her words were coming faster now, tumbling out as if they'd been dammed up for years, not weeks. I have always needed things to be just so. You know that. I thought if I controlled everything, the house, your schools, our holidays, then nothing bad could happen. But life doesn't work that way. And when the bad thing happened to you, my whole system broke. I didn't have a blueprint for my daughter is suffering and I can't fix it. So I rejected the situation. I rejected you because accepting it would have meant admitting I wasn't in control, that I couldn't protect you. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. She was sobbing openly now, quietly, her shoulders shaking. She made no move to hide it. In the middle of the cozy bookstore, my mother was publicly falling apart, and for the first time I saw her. Not as my mother, the authority figure, but as a woman, a flawed, frightened, broken woman who loved in the only broken way she knew how. When you left, she whispered, and the door closed, it was like I woke up from a terrible dream and saw the wreckage I'd caused. I have called you a burden in my head every day since, but it's me. I have been a burden to you your whole life, a burden of expectations, a burden of my own fears. I placed my need for a perfect life on your shoulders. And when you couldn't carry it anymore, I blamed you for dropping it. Her honesty was brutal. It was the kind of truth that changes the air in a room. I felt my own tears coming, not for my hurt now, but for the tragic, wasted energy of it all. All those months of tension, all that pain born from her terror and my shame. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, looking directly at me, her eyes red and swimming. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know, to really know. That it was never you. You are the best thing I have ever done, and I failed you completely. I am so ashamed. She fell silent then, spent. She had emptied herself out onto the floor between us. The ball was in my court. I looked at her, this small, devastated woman. The anger I'd been clutching like a shield was still there, but it had melted around the edges, becoming something softer and sadder. I couldn't say it's okay, because it was. I couldn't say I forgive you, because I wasn't sure I did, not yet. Forgiveness felt like a country too far away to see, but I could offer a truth of my own. I heard your voicemail, I said, my voice low, the one from 2 a.m. I heard how broken you were. I swallowed. For a while, I wanted you to feel that broken. I thought it would make me feel better. It didn't, it just made me sad. She flinched, but she kept her eyes on mine. I've been learning a lot at Grandma S., I continued. About rest, about worthiness. I paused, choosing my words carefully. What you said, it did something to me. It broke a final thread, the thread that believed home was always there no matter what, and that was a painful thing to lose. She nodded, fresh tears falling. But I said, and this was the hard part, the new part, in breaking that thread, it forced me to find my own ground. Here, in this town, in this job, I'm starting to build something for myself. It's small. It's just a few shelves of books and a tiny paycheck, but it's mine, and I don't think I would have started building it if that thread hadn't snapped. It wasn't gratitude, it was just causation. A horrible thing had led indirectly to a necessary growth. My mother heard the distinction. She nodded again, a look of profound understanding and grief on her face. I am so sorry that my failure was what it took. I wish with all my heart it had been different. I know, I said, and I did know. In that moment, I believed her regret was absolute. We sat in silence for a long minute. The emotional storm had passed, leaving a calm, devastated beach in its wake. What happens now? She asked, her voice tiny. Now, I said, feeling the truth of it as I spoke, I stay here, I work my job, I live with Grandma for a while longer until I can afford a little place of my own in town. I build my life here on my own terms. I met her gaze. And you work on yourself, you have to. Not for me, but for you, because that need to control, it's going to keep hurting people, starting with you. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said to her. It was a boundary drawn not in anger, but in sad, clear-eyed love. She absorbed it, her face pale, but she didn't argue, she didn't defend, she just nodded. I've started seeing someone, a therapist. It's very hard. Good, I said, and I meant it. I looked at the clock. My break was almost over. The mundane reality of work was a welcome anchor. I need to get back to the counter. Of course, she said, hastily wiping her face with her palms. She stood up unsteady for a moment. I stood too. We faced each other, two wounded women in a space full of stories. Can I hug you? She asked, the hope in her voice so fragile it could have shattered. I hesitated. My body didn't recoil, but it didn't lean in either. The instinctive trust was gone. Not today, I said softly. I'm not ready, she bit her lip, nodded, accepting the rejection with a grace I'd never seen in her before. Okay, I understand. She took a step back toward the door. Thank you for letting me come, for saying what you said. It's what I needed to hear. You're welcome, I said. She turned and walked to the door, her hand on the handle. She paused and looked back, not at the store, but at me behind the counter in my apron in my new life. A faint, sorrowful smile touched her lips. It held no demand, just a bittersweet recognition of the distance between us. Then she was gone, the bell jingled and the door closed softly. I stood there for a full minute, my hands flat on the wooden counter, feeling the solidity of it. I felt drained but not empty, cleansed as if a fever had finally broken. The encounter hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't restored a relationship. But it had done something crucial. It had placed the truth in all its ugly, complicated glory squarely on the table between us. There were no more monsters in the dark. We had both seen each other's. Maureen came out from the back, a gentle question in her eyes. I'm okay, I said, and for the first time it felt completely true. You did good, she said simply, and went to help a customer who had just wandered in. I took my place behind the counter, running my hand along its smooth surface. Outside the window, I saw my mother's car still parked across the street. She was sitting in the driver's seat, her head bowed over the steering wheel. She was crying. I let her cry. I didn't look away. I watched with a quiet, detached compassion as she finally faced the full weight of what she had done. After a few minutes, she started the car and drove away, turning slowly onto the road that led out of town, back to her life of controlled perfection, which she now knew was an illusion. I turned to face the shelves, to my new world of stories. The story with my mother was far from over, but a new chapter had definitively begun. And for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. Spring came softly to Cedar Brook. It arrived not with a fanfare, but with a gradual greening of the magnolia tree outside Grandma's window and with the sweet, damp smell of thawed earth. My life, too, had found a gentle rhythm. The part-time hours at the bookstore became full-time as Maureen's business picked up with the season. I learned the regulars' names, Mr. Henderson, who only read westerns, the college student Lily, who loved graphic novels, the young mothers who came for story hour. I wasn't just an employee, I was becoming a thread in the town's fabric. With my first real paycheck, I opened a bank account. The next, I started paying Grandma rent. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. It's not for the room, I told her. It's for my dignity. She understood and accepted the envelope each month with a solemn nod, tucking it into a china teapot on the highest shelf. For your future, she'd say. I found a tiny, sunlit apartment above the flower shop on Main Street. It was just one room with a kitchenette in the corner and a clawfoot tub in the bathroom, but the windows looked out over the street, and it was mine. Moving out of Grandma's was bittersweet. She helped me hang curtains and gifted me the Afghan from her sofa. So you'll always have a hug from home, she said. Her house was only a 10-minute walk away, and we had dinner together every Sunday. The safety she offered had never been a cage, it had been a launch pad. My relationship with my parents was quiet. Dad visited once a month for lunch. We talked about books, his garden, my apartment. It was easy, undemanding. He never pushed me about Mom. My mother and I texted sparingly. Pictures of her garden, a note about a book she thought I might like for the store. Simple, surface-level things. She was respecting the distance I'd asked for. I knew from Dad she was still in therapy. Sometimes her texts felt fragile, like she was trying to learn a new language. I appreciated the effort. The hard, jagged pain of Christmas had softened into a persistent, manageable ache, a reminder of a fracture that was healing but would always leave a seam. One evening in late April, I was closing up the bookstore. I was alone, stacking chairs, my mind pleasantly blank after a busy day. As I flipped the sign on the door to closed, I saw my reflection in the glass. I stopped and really looked. The woman looking back at me was familiar, yet changed. Her eyes were quieter. There were still shadows there, traces of the difficult year, but they were just parts of the landscape now, not the whole picture. She stood straight. She looked capable. She looked like someone who had weathered a storm and was now appreciating the simple fact of solid ground. I thought about the word that had started it all, burden. It didn't fit anymore. I was a daughter, a granddaughter, a bookseller, a tenant, a friend. I was a person who paid her bills, who remembered to water her plants, who knew how to make grandma's soup. I was a collection of roles and routines and small, caring actions. A burden is a dead weight. I was alive and I was moving forward under my own power. The lesson wasn't dramatic. It was simple, and it had taken a winter in my grandmother's house to learn. Your worth is not a currency you earn through achievements or the approval of others. It is the quiet, constant fact of your existence. You are worthy of space, of care, of a second chance, simply because you are. And sometimes you have to create the family you need, even if it's just you and one old woman in a blue house, before you can make peace with the family you have. I finished locking up and stepped out into the cool spring twilight. I decided to walk the long way home past the town square where daffodils nodded in planters. I breathed in the scent of blooming things. I thought of my mother, probably in her perfectly kept living room. I didn't feel anger. I felt a distant, complicated pity and a hope for both of us, that with time the seam between us might become less a scar and more just a part of our story, a place where we both grew. I reached my little apartment. I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. It was warm and quiet and mine. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, each one a small, steady promise against the gathering dark. The road here had been paved with broken words and a bus ticket bought with a maxed out credit card. It had been lit by a single porch light on a cold Christmas Eve. It hadn't been the path I'd planned, but it had brought me home, to a different home than I'd ever imagined, a truer one, built not on the expectation of perfection, but on the solid, forgiving ground of a simple, earned peace. And as I sat there in the quiet, I knew, with a calm certainty that filled my chest, that I was going to be okay. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had learned at last how to carry what was broken, and that was enough.